Yeah. Now you just getting back to the Greeks.
Yes.
You were very funny in your speech because you said that we have to pay for Greek culture and we will. At least the Europeans certainly will. The Germans in particular. But you know, the Greeks have made such an enormous contribution to Australia. They're one of the older immigrant groups. Do you think we're going to see more migration to Australia from Greece, given the problems in Greece at the moment?
I think what we will see from Europe, not just Greece, but I think sadly Ireland and a few other places.
Yeah.
Places which not so long ago were being lauded, in the case of Ireland, the Celtic tiger and all the rest of it. We will see probably the more enterprising people decide, well, what's the future for us here or our kids? Let's go somewhere where we can, in effect, make our own future. So I believe there will be more of that immigration. And I think, sadly, from Australia's point of view, we have to make sure that, because we run a global non-discriminatory policy, right, we have to make sure that we take people from all parts of the world. We can't just sort of say, well, we'll have a quota from here, a quota from there. We take people from wherever. But we've got to make sure that in doing that, we are prioritising our economic needs. Because the point you made before about the balance in the program, one of the issues we've had with public acceptance of the program was a perception sometimes under Labor in the late 80s, and then in more recent times that the balance has been tipped too far against skilled migration, for example. So you've always got to prioritise these things. So in taking migrants from abroad, we've got to make sure they understand there are criteria they're going to have to fulfil. You can't just take everybody who wants to come here. So if it's in the case of Greek migrants, they will have to understand, well, you'll still have to meet certain criteria. You're not going to get in just because you're Greek and you reflect a migrant group that's come here in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Can I just ask you one other question about the Greek diaspora in Australia?
Yes.
When I was a kid, when I was a student, the Greeks of my generation, which I guess is your generation, I'm a little older than you, but by and large did not learn Greek. Their parents were often reluctant to get them to learn Greek, and they'd pick up a bit from mum and dad, but not a lot.
Sure. My
My impression is that the next generation, their children, are learning Greek in a much more systematic way. Is that right?
I think it's a mixed picture. In my case, when we were very young, we learnt Greek before we learnt English. We learnt Greek at home, and we only spoke Greek at home until we went to school. But in places like Sydney, where you had older groups like the Cytherians and the Castellaresians, of whom there are a lot in the east, as you know, many of them had been here 1 or 2 generations, and they taught their children some Greek. But to some extent, because they were very keen to integrate at that stage, I think they were reluctant to be too open about it. That changed a bit as Australian society, particularly in the 70s and 80s, evolved more, and we became more multicultural, more culturally diverse, whatever term you want to call it. But there was more of a view that you can be, in effect, more open about this. And by that stage, there was a more systematic spread of, say, the afternoon schools, the church schools and whatever. And when I was young, apart from what I learned at home, we, every Monday or Thursday, would go to a Greek afternoon school run by the local Greek church. And so that created a more systematic spread of language, I think, through the community as those churches spread.
I think it's a great asset because I've always felt that, ideally if you have as Shakespeare said, a little Latin and less Greek, maybe you'd say a little Greek and less Latin, no doubt. But nonetheless, they are the building blocks of English. So, there's a great
it's funny how often, if you have a background in Latin or Greek, you can see the roots of so many English words.
Sure. And
part of the point I was making yesterday in the maiden speech is learning another language, any language, is actually great for the cognitive development of kids. You mentioned Barry O'Farrell earlier on. I was interested to see recently he was pushing the idea that there should be more language acquisition in primary school rather than the other way around, where it's tended to be more focused in senior school or high schools. And I think that's right, because kids' brains are so pliable when they're young and so ready to absorb things that that's the right time to get it into their heads. The other point I was making with all of that, and maybe people will agree or disagree with this, is actually learning the language is also a way to get kids to appreciate other cultures a bit better and about the way other people think. And even though we travel a lot in Australia, do we really sometimes understand the other person in the way they should?
I think I think our multiculturalism, our diversity, is one of our greatest assets. I've got no doubt about that. And the one of the interesting experiences I had when I was with Goldman Sachs, you know, a big international investment bank with whom you worked for a while, is the bank used to employ more Australians than they could ever use in Australia.
Yes.
Because they found Australians to be great travellers, and because of the multicultural background here, you could send them somewhere in the world and they would fit in. Anyway, Arthur, congratulations, Senator from Wentworth, and it's good to be with you. And I'm sure there's a lot of great things we can do together, both in Wentworth and down here.